So in the last class, we have seen little bit about time complexity of algorithms. As I said, you will learn a lot about time complexity of algorithms formally in a course on data structures and algorithms. And you have one more course class after that, course after that, that is uh, algorithm design. So you will study about time complexity of algorithms, space complexity of algorithms in detail. But in the lecture, but in this course, I would like to give you some intuition so that you can get some kind of intuition about the kind of programs, the kind of algorithms that you are coming up with to solve the programming problems at hand. So this program we have seen few weeks back, roots.c, and this program, if you think about this program is just it has a linear control flow. Okay, that means the control starts from the beginning of the program and it goes to next line, after that next line, after that next line. Like for example, here it can start on line 11 and control keeps flowing in the forward direction, and after line 36 the control flow ends. So there is this question in line 24 to 26, why can't we just add in one statement? It is possible, you can do that. Yeah, it's perfectly fine. That's it, we can do it. Yeah. So what happens is we have seen again that earlier. Yes. So that is not there in this code, whether the discriminant is greater than 0 or not. Yeah, so there is a bug in this program, that is if the discriminant is less than 0, then we get into trouble. Good. Rachit, rather than assert, it's better that we use an if statement and say in fact, in the class itself, we have modified this program later by saying if the root is greater than, if the discriminant is less than 0, say that it doesn't have real roots or something like that. We did modify that program when we looked at the roots.c program long time back. Okay, rather than assert, if is better. Here, see, assert is not, assert is for a different purpose. We will revisit assert at a different point of time. Assert is to kind of check for program correctness. So here, if the discriminant is less than 0, we should not be, what we have to do is we have to say that the given polynomial doesn't have no real roots. That's what we have to message. But assert is for a different purpose. So you have written the whole program, and along the way you want to keep track of some things are happening right. And we use assert. Assert kind of, it doesn't change the execution. Uh, yeah, but it checks for some predicates. It checks for some predicates. Like for example, when you are accessing an array, indexing an array, you may want to check whether that index is falling within the bounds. And assert sends the program if the predicate is false. Okay, as Pratyaksh rightly said. So I want you to make this distinction here, couple of things here. Number one, as the purpose of assert is different. We want to insert assert statements in order to see that, to catch any bugs in our programming logic. Please pay attention, this is an important thing. when we are trying to uh, systematically verify the correctness of our program, to see that we are not making mistakes, then we introduce assert statements to to check that whether the program satisfies certain predicates at certain program points. So it helps in debugging, it helps in arguing about the correctness of the program. But in this particular case, when the discriminant is less than 0, it is not a problem in your program. Remember, it is not a problem in your program. It is quite possible for polynomials to have which have discriminant less than 0. So in which case we just print saying this polynomial doesn't have real roots. So it's not a problem in your program. Discriminant less than 0, it's not a bug in your program. So we don't use assert. And when an assertion fails, then the program terminates saying this is the place where the assertion got violated. All right. So now let's see statements 11 to yeah. So the control flow, remember this program gets translated into a sequence of instructions. And if you go back, if you compile this compiled program, the generated a.out executable file will be present on the hard disk. And when you give this program for execution, the instructions of a.out will be loaded into RAM or main memory. And the instruction, there will be first instruction, followed by second instruction, followed by third instruction, so on and so forth. And when we give this program for execution, the control flow goes only in the forward direction. There are no forward jumps or backward jumps in this program. This is a linear control flow. So this is a linear control flow. And this program could be converted into, let's say this whole program got converted into 1,000 assembly language instructions. 1,000, this is the language which, let's say, your processor understands, or assembly language or processor instructions. Let me just use, for the sake of simplicity, 1,000 processor instructions. The whole program got converted into 1,000 processor instructions. So when we execute this program, your processor executes this 1,000 instructions. And if each instruction takes 1 unit of time, then we say your program takes 1,000 units of time. And if you look at this program, so this program, since this program has a linear control flow and there are no loops and nothing else, so what happens is every time this program gets executed, so this program has executes 1,000 processor instructions. So let's call this, let's call it as this program K. This program got translated into K processor instructions, and uh, and it takes K units of each instruction takes, let's say, it's 1 unit of work. So K units of work gets done by the processor. So K units of work, where K is a constant. K units of work gets done by the processor. Are you all with me here? We are just thinking of each assembly language instruction as 1 unit of work, and this program got translated into K processor instructions, so hence K units of work. So this is the base case to understand the time complexity. I hope you are all with me here. Now let's see, let's take a slightly, we can consider control transfer instructions like go to in the amount of work. It's okay. Yeah. So one more thing I want to say that we are trying to do a rough estimation of the amount of work that we are doing. So now let's see. Now we have this program ABS where we try to compute the absolute value of a input integer. So if the input integer is greater than x, then its absolute value is same as that integer. If it is less than 0, then so all we are saying is this whole program, it is getting mapped to a sequence of some k instructions. This program is getting mapped to a sequence of k instructions. Because, like your processor does not understand, uh, the uh, your C programs. This is a language which is designed so that we can write programs easily, but your processor does not. The CPU does not understand your C program. So your C program gets translated to a sequence of instructions which your processor can understand. And in these programs where the control flow is only straight, so when you execute this program, so this is the program in your RAM, which is a sequence of k instructions. So these k instructions gets executed. So that means your processor is doing k units of work, and k is a constant, some constant. All right. Is it clear, Dhruv? So now next is, so this program is slightly different. There is a control flow in this. So depending upon the condition, whether the statement on line 11 or statement on line 13 gets executed. So let's say, so this whole, so we can kind of logically view this program into this. The program starts here, and depending upon whether x greater than 0, so this is the predicate that we have. So here you have printf and scanf statement, and depending upon whether x is greater than 0, you execute one part, the if. So yes, no, and after that you come out here and you execute the printf. Okay, so this is what happens. So let's say this here you have K1 instructions are present, and here K2 instructions are present, here K3 instructions are present, here K4 instructions are present. So when you execute the program, your program takes either this path or the other path. So if the program takes this S path, then it executes. So there are two possibilities here. One is the S path, that is if x is greater than or equal to 0, then your program executes K1 plus K2 plus K3, K4. Yeah, K1, K2 are the number of instructions, That's true. And what is the no path? The no path is K1 plus K3 plus K4. But until we execute the program, we don't know whether the program takes S path or no paths. In some cases, it may take S path. Some cases, it may take no path. So when you want to estimate the program execution time, so we do what is called as a worst case estimate. Worst case program execution time is K1 plus max of K2 comma K3 plus K4. This is the worst case program execution. Where K1, so these two instructions corresponding to printf and scanf, they go to this particular block, and also the checking of condition x greater than is equal to 0, that also goes to this block. And this statement 11, it goes to this block, and statement 13 goes to this block. This is statement 13, and statement 15 goes to this block. No, don't worry about it. So we are not exactly execution time. This is like proportional measured in, it's not exact execution time. We want to get an estimate of how much amount of work that is being done. Or you can say worst case number of program steps, you can call it if you want to be more precise. Actually, we just say all this is program execution time. So if you're not happy with it, what we want to say is your program execution time is proportional to this. Your program execution time is proportional to K1 plus max of K2, comma K3 plus K4. It is proportional to that. Are you with me on this proportionality thing? It is proportional to that. Okay, because actual execution time depends on many other factors, but this is a good estimate. It is proportional. Statement 12, that's not the right way to think. The logic associated with it is not a line-to-line mapping of line to, when you translate your C program to assembly code, it is not a line-to-line mapping of your C code to assembly code. The logic that is equivalent to that if then else statement will be mapped to assembly code. So if you exactly see for a mapping of else, you will not find it, but a logical equivalent of that will be there. So a logical equivalent of that will be there in the assembly code, not the exact line-to-line map. So shall I proceed? Are you with me on this one? This particular idea, are you all with me? Good. So now let's look at one more program. This is sum.c program. Again, in the sum.c program, if you see what happens is, so there will be uh, there will be one the instructions associated with let's say the printf statement on line 8, they will be present here. And then, so if the while condition is false, then you come to yeah, so how do I put it here? So let me draw it this way. Yeah. You come here and you check some condition, and if that condition is roughly speaking, and then you come out and you do printf. Okay, I am doing an approximate mapping of this to here, or rather, if I don't have a clear mapping because the mapping here gets a bit tricky, let me do one thing. So I think you may get confused. Does the while statement here check if only one digit is entered? See, Tanay, you should, we spent one entire lecture on scanf. You should go check for that lecture on scanf one more time. So what does the scanf does? Scanf tries to, when there is a %d format specifier, it eliminates, let's say if this is your keyboard buffer, No, like all spaces, white line characters, it will ignore. It will extract the integer, and if it successfully reads an integer, it returns 1. On the contrary, if it is something else, then like if it encounters an A, then it says there is a problem, and it returns 0 or some other. So yeah, let's come back here. So what is happening here is, if you see associated with the printf statement, there will be some number of instructions. Let's say K1 instructions are there. And associated with the statement on line 12, that is sum is equal to sum plus n. Let's say there are K2 instructions are there. And associated with statements on, so here, so we have K3 instructions. So what happens is, if you see, although there are only K2 instructions associated with line 12, so these instructions are executed again and again. Okay, so after these instructions are executed, so control goes back to the beginning of the while statement, and if scanf returns a 1, if this predicate turns out to be true, you enter this loop again, and you keep doing this. So the time taken for this program to execute is K1 plus n times, I will say K2n plus K3, where n is the number of input integers that we have entered. N is the number of input integers that we have entered. So this part corresponds to the while loop. This part corresponds to the while loop. And what we say is this program, but approximately what we say is this program, the time taken by this program execution time, what we say is it is proportional to n. It is proportional to n, or we say it is approximated by n. So why is that? So if you think about it, let's say if your actual program execution time, if you kind of count it, it is K2n plus K1 plus K3. And if I say, it's approximately, that's the program execution time is approximately proportional to n. If you take this ratio, and if you check how far this ratio is as limit n tends to infinity, that is as the size of the input keeps growing, then you know that this is equal to K2. So by saying that the program execution time is n, it's a constant factor approximation to the actual program execution time. So what we are getting here is constant factor approximation. When we say that the program execution time is n, then it's a constant factor approximation. It's a constant factor approximation. But if we say that the program execution time is n square instead of is proportional to n square, then we are in trouble, because it's not a constant factor approximation. It's a bad approximation of the program execution time. Are you with me on this particular example of constant factor approximation? Because we are just losing out on this constant and some additive constant, and this K2 we are losing out. But when I say that the program execution time is say n, approximately n, then it can be 2n, 3n, or 1.5n, or whatever it is, and it's okay. And this constant K2 we kind of don't pay. It's a constant approximation because the actual execution time is K2 n plus K1 plus K3, but we are ignoring this K2 and all these constants, and we are saying approximately this is n. That's why we are saying. Yeah, it depends. But in this particular case, just focus on this particular example. In this particular case, the actual execution time, we can say K2n plus K1 plus K3. But if you say, we say it's an approximation because we are ignoring this constant. So if we say it is n, the actual execution time, we know it is within some constant times n. It is within some constant times. So what it means is the actual, yeah, that's true. If it is, if kn square is approximated by n square, then we still call it as a constant factor approximation. No, because why we are dividing it by n? Because we are saying the execution time is proportional to n. So let me share the whiteboard. Hmm. So let me come here. Uh, See the original. So if in the particular problem that we looked at, so the execution time, it is, let's say K1 plus NK2 plus K3. So a K1 plus NK2 plus K3. So let's say this is actual, this is not even actual execution time, but but actual execution time is proportional to this. Okay, but let's say for the sake of simplicity, so let's call it as actual execution time. Are you with me on this one? Let's like K1 is the precursor to the while loop and NK2 corresponds to the while loop and K3. Are you with me on this one? So if you look at these constants, what we generally want to see is how that algorithm's running time is growing as a function of input. As a function of input is like if you think about it, so as this is the size of the input, and as the input is growing, we want to know whether uh, the 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 time taken by the algorithm is it a linear growth, or or is it growing quadratically, or is it growing exponentially. We are interested in how the trend. This is what is called as an asymptotic analysis. We are interested in the trend. Okay, so interested in the growth, how it is growing, interested in growth, how or this is what is also called as asymptotic analysis. So if you think about asymptotic analysis, so instead of if you take this function k1 plus nk2 plus k3, you will get some line here. But instead, if you kind of if you say like you can kind of approximate this whole execution time by saying it as n. So when we say the execution time is n, then that means the actual execution time is always within some constant of within some constant factor of n. Like for example, in this particular case, the actual execution time, if you think of the actual execution time, the actual execution time is bounded by no k2n plus some constant. So because of that, we say this is a constant factor approximation. Because the growth remains the same, it's not going to the shape of the curve is not going to change. It may be moved by some extent, but the shape, the slope may change a bit, but the shape of the curve is not going to change. So the actual execution time, it could be 2, it could be 2n or 3n or 4n. So based on that, the slope will change, but broadly the slope will change, but the curve shape is not going to change. So that's the reason this is a constant factor approximation. So if you differentiate with respect to n, we get k2. You can think of it that way, but you don't need to think in that. You don't need to go till that far. All you have to do is when we kind of say the program execution time is approximately n, then that means the actual program execution, it is within constant factor of n. Like for example, if it is n, then the actual program execution time from n, we can say that the actual program execution time, if someone says that the program execution time is proportional to n, then the actual program execution time is less than or equal to n for some constant c. That's true. So essentially, we want to see as the input grows, how the program execution time scales is what we are looking for here. So before I go further, are you with me on this particular idea? So that what is a constant factor approximation? Because these constants k1, k2, k3, we kind of ignore and roughly say that the program takes linear time. This is what is called as a linear time. This is linear time on. What is a non-constant factor approximation? If you say that the program execution time is a constant, then it's not a non-constant factor approximation. Like for example, in this particular case, instead of saying that the program execution time is proportional to n, you say that the program execution time is actually a constant, then it's a problem. Because you will not be able to, then you are kind of saying this is an approximation, this line is an approximation of this line which is going up. So it's not a non-constant approximation. All right. One more thing I would like you to pay attention here, from practical perspective, we kind of ignore these constants k3, k2, k1 and roughly want to say that this the program execution time is proportional to n, because this k1, k2, k3, etc., they depend on the processor. So having them, so on part of actual program analysis may not be yeah, they may not give you much information, because yeah, depending upon the processor, these constants could change. So you may not want to worry so much about those constants. So now let's look at one more example, which I think some of you are, let's say, uh, program execution time. So let's say, or let me say, this is what is called as a time complexity. So let's say T of n, let me use this notation. T of n means time complexity of a program where n is the size of the input. So let's say the time complexity of a program is something like k1n square plus k2n plus some constant k3. So in this particular case, we cannot say uh, the so if you want to say this is proportional to n, we cannot say because it's not possible to this is not a constant factor approximation for T of n, because it is not possible for you So if you see this, if you see the graph as n increases, this is T of n. Okay, so T of n is growing like this. So if you have no curve, will be able to bound uh, this quadratic growing function. So you cannot say that n is a constant factor approximation for T of n. But what you can say is you can say n square is a constant factor approximation. Because by choosing suitably large, suitable constant C, so because this is all right, because there exists some constant C, such that the time complexity of n is less than or equal to Cn square. So this C could be maybe, like you may want to, it may not just be K1 because you have some additive terms here. So maybe you can use K1 plus 1 or something like that. So some constant greater than K1 you can use so that this can, bound the actual complexity of. No, so this is the actual, there will be some actual time complexity, but you can just say n square is the time complexity. That's okay. Yeah. So there is an actual thing k1 n square, k2 n plus k3, all those constants, etc. we can ignore, and we can just take the dominant term, and we say this dominant term in this polynomial, it kind of approximates the time complexity of the algorithm. What if there is a loop that runs n times and another that runs n times? Usually, in which case we may, in practice, we say the time complexity is proportional to nm. nm. This is not a formal treatment, but I want to give you some intuition. That is, if there is a program with three components, one component takes this time, another component takes this time, another component takes this time. So the program execution time is dominated by this. Are you with me here on this one? So why n square is a good approximation, but not n? Are you with me here? This one, I want you to ask. This is not a good approximation, but whereas the n square is a good approximation. So there is a question. Let me take the question. I'm not able to see where, how to permit you to. Let me stop my, yeah. Yes, Chinmay, go ahead and ask the question.
Sir, you were saying that if we have a function k1 n square plus k2 n plus k3, you said
Mhm.
if you reduce it to n square, it would be a good approximation.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
I didn't exactly get why we would need to do that. Couldn't we just leave it at that and use it to solve the problem?
Because when we are trying to look at algorithms, when you look at your thing, you just want to get a sense of that. All the other things, they are not going to matter much because the n square thing is going to dominate.
Okay.
So that's the reason. Like, for example, this is what we try to do. Let's take, since you asked that question, so let's look at, yeah. So let's look at we try to plot. So let's say you have something like this is 2, let's say it is 4, you have, let's consider this function. So 4n square plus 3n here, 4n square plus 3n plus let's say some 1000. And so one approximation is n square. You ignore these lower order terms and see what happens. And the last approximation is another approximation is you ignore even this constant factor and do this n square. And then the other approximation is kind of, let's say, n. Okay, now let's see, we have a graph here. Let's try to plot the graph and see what happens. So the first thing is 4n square. Maybe I should use, it's better to use this 4n square plus, sorry, this should be t plus 3n 3t plus 1000. This is the original graph. And then we have t comma 4 star. So can you tell how this graph looks like? This is the first thing that we are doing. We are plotting 4n square plus 3n plus 1000, and we are plotting 4n square. How will this graph look like? Python 3. Yeah, we will do first plot. We'll just plot this, or maybe, yeah, we can plot this also. T star. Okay, so this is what we have. So we are plotting 3 graphs. One is, no, this is the actual function. This is where we are just taking 4n square and we are just taking n square. So these are 3 interesting things to look at. So now if you see this 4n square, this first and second, they are exactly coinciding. So the additive terms, they don't have any value per se. They don't have any value. But t square, so t square, it's a constant factor approximation. So because of that, you see, they are growing apart. But what we can say is, no, this, if you take this curve and multiply it by 4, then you will definitely hit this curve here. So having all these lower order terms, like 3n plus 1000, all those things, they don't, as the value of n increases, they don't really matter. What becomes dominant is the higher order term becomes dominant. Are you with me on this example? Chinmay, does it make sense to you? So the lower order, so why unnecessarily bother about all those details doesn't matter, because let's say if you want to optimize on the program, you want to focus on that part of the program which is causing that, which is contributing that 4n square term to the time complexity. And when we say, usually we kind of ignore that 4 also, and we just say n square, because that 4, depending upon how you write the program and many other things, you can take care of. Or so we deal with the constants in a different way. But what we say is this n square is a constant factor approximation is the important idea. Yes, that's true. We need to focus on the which is asymptotically dominant, that n square. Yeah, if you think about it that way. All right. How many of you are with me in today's lecture? Are you all doing good? Can I see some? please think about these ideas. And the important thing is we are doing an approximation. When we do micro calculation of what contributes what, you don't get the big picture. You get confused. So what we want is to get a big picture on the time complexity of the algorithm. But if you look at the micro things, they don't contribute much. So you don't. So you may want to attend to them at a later phase, but when you want to look at an algorithm immediately, in order to get a good sense about the algorithm, you try to get a macro picture. So what is the macro picture? Like if the time complexity of if you look at different levels of zoom, if you look at so 4n square plus 3n plus 1000, this could be, there can be actually a much more micro picture than this, in the sense like this is the number of steps taken, but how does it translate to actual execution time? So this is a much more micro picture. But then you can go in the opposite direction and say, I don't care about this 3n plus 1000, let me worry about this 4n square. And the much more higher granular picture is, I don't worry about this 4n, this 4. I just look at this thing, whether it is quadratic term or linear. So this is, as we go, if we go up, we kind of zoom out and try to get a macro picture about our program. And we can zoom in and we try to get a micro picture. And so micro usually, that's also important. Uh, but what happens is we look at the micro picture in when we are working with systems, in the sense you have an algorithm which takes, let's say, 4n square, and it's possible, like for example, instead of 4n, it is possible for us to shave off this 4 if in the processor, if there is a special instruction set called a SIMD instruction set. Then if you use that SIMD instruction set, it is possible to shave off this 4 and come to an algorithm which looks like this. So here, then it becomes very architecture specific and whole lot of other things come into picture. Let's not worry into look at those things right now. So our goal right now is to get a sense of the problem at hand, the algorithm at hand. Hey, does the time taken by the program, is it proportional to n? Is it proportional to n square? Is it proportional to n cube? What is it? That kind of sense let's try to develop, as we are all beginner programmers. Yeah, the constants depends on the processor also, Lakshman. That's true, very much true. So yeah, it depends on the constant, depends on many things. So that's the reason we try to ignore them. And so if we have an expression like 4m square plus 3, 4m square plus 3n square plus 4m plus n plus 12, it will be, usually you don't get this kind of complicated algorithm expressions for your programs, but I would say this is the dominant term, 4m square in square, it is a dominant term. So the n cube, what about the n cube? Where is n cube? Oh, 3n cube. Yeah, so 3n cube. So even if it is n cube is there, 4m square plus 3n cube, it depends on, so in order to do understand programs with this kind of time complexity, we try to find the relationship between m and n. We try to keep, like for example, when we are working, sometimes what happens is, like under the hood, it so happens that m is proportional to n square or something like that. It happens when we are working with graphs, etc., later on in your data structures course. So unless like you are clear about the independence of m and n, and it depends on context whether we ignore or not. So for example, usually this M and N thing, one place where it comes is when you are working with graphs where M is the number of edges and N is the number of nodes or vertices. And so usually the number of edges are proportional to quadratic specifically to the number of vertices, then it can becomes an issue. So if there is no relationship, then we keep m square or just keep n cube? I don't have an answer to that question to pose it by Tanay and Kishore. I think we have to look at the problem, and we have to look at it is problem specific. So you have a valid problem, but I would say it is problem specific. So when the problem comes, maybe we may have to do case analysis and arrive at a correct conclusion. But you understand the spirit. Okay, so you understand the spirit because you are trying to do an approximation. In what cases it makes sense, what cases it doesn't make sense, it depends on problem. All right, that's what I would say. There is no kind of general answer to this question, but it's a good question. I want you to understand this thing that we are trying to come up with an approximation which gives us a good sense about the problem. That's what we are trying to get. Okay. So keep that in mind, and we will, depending upon the problem, we may have to work out the details. So I think I should stop my discussion here today. It's tomorrow I may actually take 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. session, the lab session, because Wednesday will not be able to take the lecture. So let's conclude the lecture here for today. Just want to check once. How are you all doing? How did today's lecture go? Are you